All right, well, welcome this evening, everyone, to tonight's great webinar. My name is Dr. Ben Bellarato. I'm the laboratory director at Curating Archaeological Center, and I'm really excited to bring you this evening's webinar with Andrea Hanley entitled Curating in Context, a discussion on current Wheelwright Museum exhibitions. Now, before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about our organization and our webinar series, and then we'll jump right to it. Here at Curating Archaeological Center, we respectfully acknowledge the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene or Navajo, and Hickory Apache, people on whose traditional homelands this institution sits and upon which we work and reside. Now, our mission-related work would not be possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future. And we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humankind. Curating is grateful to all Indigenous people and supports the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. Now, here at Curating, our mission is to empower present and future generations by making the human past accessible and relevant through archaeological research, experiential education, and American Indian knowledge. And you can find out more about our programs and initiatives at crowcanyon.org. And we thank you very much for supporting our webinar series. Now, Crow Canyon's campus is located just north of the beautiful Ute Mountain in southwestern Colorado, just outside of Cortez, Colorado. And when we eventually reopen our campus, we invite you to come and check us out. In the meantime, please look at our website and see all the interesting research initiatives and education programs that we're doing. So before we get started, I want to give you a couple tips that will enhance your viewing experience, or at least have the potential to. So I know over the last 3 years, excuse me, many of us around the world have become very adept and familiar with Zoom, the video conferencing program. But in case you haven't had the opportunity to use Zoom, I'll give you a couple tips. So on my Zoom screen, when I open it up, and for most people, we have this box that says chat, raise hand, Q&A, and live transcript. And that's really important for your interaction with the webinar. You have the opportunity to ask questions, and we invite you, please ask questions. And Andrea has asked that we ask her the questions all at the end. But if you have a question at any point throughout the webinar, you can click on that and type your question in. And Jeremy Grunvig, tonight's webinar tech guru, and I will be compiling like questions and trying to look for the most relevant and the questions make the most sense in the proper order to ask Andrea at the end. So please enter your questions there. And if you have just a chat, you want to say hi to anybody, you can go ahead and put that in the chat function. And we'll try to get to all the questions. Now, if you're having trouble viewing our live stream here, you can actually tune into our live stream on Facebook, which is really about a second delay. So really just, pretty much right at the moment of when things are happening. And you can get to that at crowcanyon.org/Facebook. And you can also look at our YouTube channel, and this presentation, along with many of our previous webinars, will be curated on our YouTube channel, which is at crowcanyon.org/YouTube. So when you want to tune back in and see Andrea's great presentation again, you know where to go. And we invite you to like and subscribe to us on YouTube and to our different programs, and that'll help us unlock different functions that, again, will help enhance your viewing experience. We have another upcoming webinar next week, Thursday, November 17th at 4 p.m. And this is a presentation that is co-sponsored by the Hisatsinom chapter of the Colorado Archaeological Society. And it's entitled A Summer of Reconnections, Redocumenting Dene Archaeology Sites on Chakra Mesa with Davina Two Bears. And that should be very interesting as well. So please tune in for that. And I want to turn to tonight's webinar and tell you a little bit about our great speaker. Andrea R. Hanley is the chief curator at the Wheelwright Museum of the American Indian in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She is dedicated to the work of contemporary Native American artists and the Native American fine art field. Andrea has over 30 years of experience in the field, including at the National Museum of the American Indian, Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., as both the special assistant to the director and exhibition developer and project manager. She also has worked as a fine arts coordinator and curator for the city of Tempe, an executive director for Adel Incorporated, a national service organization for Native American arts, the founding manager of the Berlin Gallery at the Heard Museum, and the membership and program manager for the AIAI Museum of Contemporary Native American Arts. She currently sits on the board of directors for the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts, the Santa Fe Indian Art Market, the Santa Fe Art Institute, the Roswell Artists in Residency Foundation, Voices in Contemporary Art, and Axel Contemporary. She also sits on the 516 Arts Ambassador Council, the Native American Advised Fund for the Santa Fe Community Foundation, UCross Foundation, National Advisory Council, and the Native American Advisory Board for NEST. She was on the Santa Fe Arts Commission from 2019 through 2021, and she is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. So I want to welcome Andrea Hanley to our webinar. And again, her presentation is entitled Curating in Context, a Discussion on Current Wheelwright Museum Exhibitions. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and turn it over to you, Andrea.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. Again, my name is Andrea Hanley, and I am Navajo. I'm from the capital of the Navajo Nation, Window Rock, Arizona. And I am absolutely delighted and honored to speak to Crow Canyon today. So why don't you go ahead and switch this? It's actually not good morning, as it says there in Navajo, but it's evening. So just a little bit about the I'll give you some context about the Wheelwright Museum, which is located here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was founded in 1937, and it's New Mexico's oldest nonprofit independent museum, and it offers exhibitions of contemporary and historic Native American art. And the museum's holding include over 11,500, give or take, objects, including paintings and sculpture and jewelry and metalwork and carvings and baskets and folk art and textiles of tribes across the Southwest. And the museum's archives actually hold about 500 linear feet of archives, and it includes the papers of a lot of noted scholars of Native American subjects and important Native American artists. The museum was founded by a woman named Mary Cabot Wheelwright, and her collaborator in founding this exhibition, or excuse me, this museum, was a Navajo man named Hosteen Claw, who was an esteemed Navajo a singer, or as just like I said, a medicine man. So I always love to bring this up. The Wheelwright was visited in 1938 by Mark Rothko. And go ahead and switch it. You can switch this slide. And you can switch it again. You can switch it again. So the Wheelwright was visited in 1938 by Mark Rothko, who's an important moderns painter who lived in the East Coast, and he was inspired by the Wheelwright at that time. The Art Deco interpretation of the Navajo Hogan was a design by William Penhallow Henderson, and Rothko was so inspired by design, and it was actually the inspiration of what is now known. You can go ahead and switch it. Slide. Now known as the Rothko Chapel in Houston. So you can kind of see what the Wheelwright looks like and what Mark Rothko's interpretation of the Wheelwright looks like. So here's the interior of the chapel, which has recently been renovated. So go ahead and switch to again. So the museum was originally known as a Museum of Museum of Navajo Ceremonial Art. And in 1977, the museum recognized the authority of the Navajo Medicine Men's Association by repatriating several Navajo medicine bundles and other items to Navajo people who now maintain them at Dana College's Ned A. Hatofley Center. And with that repatriation in 1977, the museum also changed its name to the Wheelwright Museum of the American Indian. So as you can see, the Wheelwright was actually very innovative and forward-thinking in terms of its good relationship with Native people, Native tribes, and sacred items, and looking at returning things that needed to belong with their people well before NAGPRA was actually put into place. So go ahead and switch it. I was asked to speak on my experiences as a Navajo curator and an administrator. And so most of the exhibitions that I've worked on have had a connection to community social justice issues or matters that are important or relevant to Indigenous people. And I want to support and reflect contemporary Indigenous concerns, as well as my tribal core values. And I want audiences and the larger community to be aware that there are Indigenous people all over the world and to know what's important to them. And as a Navajo, I want people to understand that reality as well. So my background is in both public programs and education, and I believe making my curatorial practice more layered. And in that way, I try to connect audiences in many different ways. The work I curate in some ways is trans-customary and it is informed by tradition and history, but also engaged in less traditional art forms and or very contemporary practice. So in a sense, what I try to do is I try to connect contemporary Indigenous discourse with contemporary art theory and offer Native artists and an audience to see opportunities where ideas and art overlap. Using contemporary art and Native artists to be seen in a different light. How can artists make us think and act? I think that contemporary Indigenous discourse is a part of contemporary discourse. And the work is actively engaged as part of the discussion, and my exhibitions don't separate works from it. It looks to the Native voice in contemporary practice and it broadens it. I find looking at art these days that it is an evolving process, and I look to build new meaning and to context to the way that we form as Native people, our resilience, our identity, our power or our agency, and drive home the importance of this work. My experiences as a Native person is a major component of my curatorial practice. Art history for us as Navajos is really a part of our lives and our families and our grandmothers or our mothers who, for example, wove rugs to feed us. So we'll go ahead and just look at a couple of shows that I've done. Go ahead and switch the. So this is an exhibition called Indigenous Women Border Matters. And that exhibition featured 4 Indigenous women artists who address issues on both sides of the United States border and whose practice is guided by current issues of identity, self-determination, feminism, human rights, and their impacts on the human experience. So the work also explores and questions the way in which Indigenous women interact with the land that we inhabit, and layering of symbolism and meaning in the works, and the deconstruction of concepts like memory, cultural heritage, and the political form, really the basis of this exhibition that people like McKay Lewis, who is Kana'ana Atum, Daisy Quesada Urena, who is Mexican-American, and Janae Sanchez and Gabriela Munoz, who are both Latinx, who come from a border town in Arizona called Douglas, Arizona, which is on the border of Arizona and Agua Prieta, which is on the Mexican side. So I was really excited to present this exhibition at the Wheelwright, and I've been a huge fan of a lot of these women and their art practices and their advocacy and community engagement. So I've been watching people like Janae and Gabriela's work since they were in graduate school at ASU. I've been a huge fan of Daisy Quesada's work and getting to know her here in Santa Fe as she's a professor at the Institute of American Indian Arts. McKay Lewis, who's Kana'atum, was Daisy's student. And so when I came to do a senior credit, I was really impressed by this young artist. So you can go ahead, and that was the element to I needed to showcase all of them. So go ahead and switch the page. So now you can kind of see that Munoz and Sanchez created a series of portraits on handmade bricks entitled Labor Retratos, Mujeres de Dougla Prieta Trabaja. So from the original installation, it was a wall of bricks that ran 22 feet. And those pieces and portraits depicted indigenous women who are part of a collective in Agua Prieta that formed in 2003 to develop kind of local capacities for economic self-sufficiency. So they were trying to liberate the community from dependency upon charity. And so these women would come together and support one another and develop expertise in, like, for example, raising chickens and rabbits and growing sustainable food and creating and selling crafts. And they exercise their leadership by sharing power and knowledge and by strengthening and supporting the collective and by encouraging the individual. So those, I think it's the next one. Is it the next one? Go ahead. The next slide.
Artist Sanchez.
Oh no, you can go back. I'm sorry. Let's just go back. So really the sculptural portraits pay homage to those women of color who can lead horizontally. And so the bricks represent the collective's power to build their own futures, both physically and figuratively. And more recently, the collective built a meeting hall where they gather regularly. So I guess they were housed in a place that the rent went up. And so they couldn't pay the rent, but they figured out how to create bricks and houses, and they built themselves a place where they could meet. So those bricks that you see here actually made of Mexican soil and in a town in Baja, the Mexican state of Baja California, and were imported through Douglas, Arizona at the border checkpoint. So they too are migrant objects. You can go ahead and I think press the sound so you can listen to them talk a little bit about it.
Artists Sanchez and Munoz are fronterizas whose collaborations began in 2009. Their work with the Women of Dougla Prieta Trabaja members first began in 2015 when Sanchez was invited to paint a mural on the newly completed meeting hall the women constructed in Agua Prieta, Sonora. A native of Douglas, Arizona, Sanchez attended Arizona State University and returned to her home community after completing her MFA in Intermedia to build community in a city that is often misunderstood. In 2016, Sanchez and Munoz were invited to collaborate on a series of portraits highlighting Dougla Prieta Trabaja key leaders. Their ongoing collaboration with the women now spans 5 years and includes the portraits of the women, development of an archive of the Colectiva members' oral histories, a series of skill-building workshops, as well as the development of artistic work. Dougla Prieta Trabaja's work is centered on peer-to-peer learning as a means of empowering fronteriza women. Colectiva members live in the same neighborhood and gather weekly in order to engage in knowledge exchanges around food production, sewing, embroidery, cooking, tending livestock like rabbits and chickens, and many other skills, supporting each other and their families. This historical and cultural knowledge is transferred from woman to woman and is kept alive by the Colectiva, underpinning the potential for self-sufficiency and generosity that is often missing from the national discourse around Mexican nationals and fronterizos.
Go ahead and click the page. This is just another example of their work. This is a series of ongoing portraits called Brown on Brown. And they again represent and document women who nurture their communities. And so each of those portraits were using ink that's made with breast milk, Mexican earth, and serigraphed on handmade paper from Sora, choya, and yucca plant fibers, and combined with migrant clothing. It's neat though, the bricks are exciting. The brick walls actually were brought into the collection of the Wheelwright, and now are going to be borrowed by the Museum of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution for an upcoming exhibition, and we're thrilled about that. So go ahead and click the next one. So this is a work of McKay Lewis, who is a very young artist. She was born in 1996, if you can believe that. She comes from a small secluded village of Ventana on the Tohono O'odham Nation in Arizona, and her hometown has currently a population of 49, and it's located 60 miles from the Mexican border. Lewis says, being from a border tribal nation which has never been removed from its traditional lands, I'm comforted in knowing where I am and where I was meant to be, but I find discomfort knowing that many issues arise when there's an imaginary political line leaving half of my nation in the United States and half of it in Mexico. So go ahead and switch to the page. This particular piece we accessioned into our collection and is being borrowed by the Wheelwright Museum for an exhibition on borders as well. You can listen to McKay talk about this particular piece.
This was another time Border Patrol was tailgating us, but my dad was driving this time. Because Border Patrol hadn't pulled us over all the time they were following us, my dad got impatient and pulled off the road at his own free will. He rolled the window down, and Border Patrol pulled up next to us and asked my dad why he stopped. My dad then yelled back, "Because you guys are just following us." My dad is disabled. He's unable to turn his head or his body, so when he yelled at them, he couldn't actually turn to face them. And since I was sitting behind him, I could clearly see the agent sitting in the passenger seat. He looked over at the driver. They both laughed. Then he leaned more out of the passenger window and mockingly yelled back, "Sir, are you okay?"
Go ahead and switch to the next slide.
This was another time Border Patrol was tailgating us,
You can switch
but my
to
dad was driving this time.
And these are a couple of extra samples of McKay's work.
This was a common scene in my childhood. From the early mornings to late nights, migrants packed in trucks always drove the back roads next to my grandma's house going north. My mom once said that me and my siblings had told her, "Mom, those Juchkum waved at us and we waved back." Juchkum is the plural form of Juchkum, which is what we O'odham call people from the south.
Go ahead in the next slide. So this is the next work of Daisy Quesada Urina, and she says she addresses social issues that are not openly discussed. And so her work bridges the personal to the social, forming a relationship with immigration and gender inequality, labor and class issues that have resulted in a population that is left feeling devalued and lost within their own culture. So she uses an altered lace draping technique that she uses. Her own garments are donated by people on either side of the US and Mexican border, creating works that are both personal and very complex in nature. So she takes garments of those individuals created through a transformative state using a porcelain slip. Drawing from the internal vulnerability carried by each of the garments, the work acts as imprints of past states and are a culmination of identities collected and externalized. And so this particular piece called Arbiola de Violencia translates basically loosely to the rape tree. The series of porcelain garments, I think you can kind of see them there. Go ahead and change the slide.
Using an abandoned lace draping technique.
Okay. The series porcelain garments finally detail a record of 9 Indigenous women. Each garment is layered in meaning more closely associated with vulnerability. For women who want a better life, the experience of crossing borders brings so many risks, and the tenor of the installation is fearsome with a somber beauty. And that, unfortunately, what happens with a lot of women who are passing the borders is that they're attacked, and as a form of an award or a souvenir or what have you, their underwear is placed on a tree. for other women to see as they're going past. It's a very violent kind of thing, and Daisy talked about it specifically with this work. And so go ahead and go to the next slide. I guess, you know, what I'm trying to do with this show is it provides a glimpse of those lives that intersect with the border, including, you know, those who thrive, exist, and survive. And so the questions that I was trying to ask with this is, what do Indigenous women face in their daily lives on or around the border? These particular women, these Arizona and Native-based artists, I believe, are keenly aware of these issues and have thoughtfully addressed them in ways that are both personal and far-reaching, and connecting and inspiring, I think, to those who do not witness the certainties faced by many Indigenous women today, and many times the harsh realities of that life. So go ahead to the next one. So this is a project that I recently did that was just taken down a couple of, like a month ago, and it was called Activation Transformation. And go ahead and switch the slide. And this is where I invited a multidisciplinary artist, Nathan Young, who is Delaware, Kiowa, and Pawnee, to utilize objects from the Wheelwright Museum to create his interpretation of the collection. So what Nathan did is he researched the Wheelwright collection, and through an exploration and selection, created what we called Activation Transformation, which was an installation utilizing his findings. So it was a contemporary art installation that he created out of using over 200 objects drawn from the museum's extensive collection. So Nathan's visual selection of the items and the arrangement created a single abstract composition. And so those works speak for themselves, allowing both Nathan and the public to find new ways of contemplating and understanding objects. So go ahead and switch the slide. So in that sense, you know, I was trying to figure out a way to really kind of connect younger artists with objects that from a very, very old collection, and how do you do that? And this was my idea, was bringing someone in to create an installation for them, and it was very successful. So in that way, I feel like the Wheelwright acts as a creative catalyst for an installation like this. And Young is creating a space that reflects the museum's history. It celebrates current artistic endeavors. It experiments with future methodologies emerging in Native art. And it explores, you know, this particular project really explores how contemporary artists can employ existing art and materials as a tool in making new work, and how activating a museum's collection in this way can give it new meaning and interpretation. And I was personally excited to see the personality of the museum as Nathan made his selections in the collection. I saw a sense of humor and curiosity, a respect for quality, and sometimes anonymity of pieces made by Native American artists that dated back to the mid-1880s, which made up Nathan's installation. So I was excited to be able to work with Nathan on this project due to the very broad nature of his practice, which is very fluid through a whole bunch of different mediums. He's a scholar, an artist, a composer working in an extended practice that looks at incorporating sound and video and documentary and animation and installation and socially engaged art, as well as experimental and improvised music. He was a founding member of the art collective called Post Commodity. He's received his MFA in music and sound from Baird's College, Northern Avery School of New York, and he is currently pursuing his PhD at the University of Oklahoma in their innovative Native American art history doctoral program, where he's focused on Indigenous sonic agency. Go ahead and switch the slide. He is a very interesting artist, again, has been supported by places like Creative Capital, the Tulsa Arts Fellowship, the Pew Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, the Tribeca Film Festival, the Sundance Film Festival. He's an enrolled member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians and a direct descendant of a Pawnee Nation and the Kiowa tribe. And he served as an elected tribal council member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians from 2016 to 2020. So I was also working not only with an artist, but a politician. So with Nathan, he had talked about this project and said, I'm telling a very complex story of the Southwest mystique, and I'm looking forward to alternative Native narratives in contemporary Native art. So go ahead and switch the slide. And again, he found all kinds of really, really interesting things. One of my more favorite things was a smaller whistle, and it was a whistle that had inlaid turquoise in it. And as I did research for it, I found that it had been commissioned by the Zuni Pueblo. And it was just this beautiful little whistle, and they commissioned these whistles for all of their police officers. So all of the police officers had these beautiful whistles that had inlaid turquoise in them, which I thought was very fancy. So go ahead and switch to the next one. He created a song for this as well, which is great. Go ahead and switch. This is ultimately how we got the to make sure that our public wasn't able to touch the installation. So this was how we did that. And go ahead and change the. So these are current exhibitions at the Wheelwright right now. This is a piece that we did during COVID, and it kind of shows you sort of a lot of different ways that we're looking at partnering and looking at projects. And so this is a film project that we did in Santa Fe called Following in Chapman's Line. We worked with director Stephen Yazzie, who's to the left. And I think, Jeremy, you can play the little video if we have it. So this is a project that we did in partnership with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and it was, we did this with the filmmaker and artist Stephen Yazzie, who is Navajo, who directed the film. And then we showcased renowned dancers, Jacques Soto, who is Navajo, who was the principal dancer at the New York City Ballet, and then his student, Harrison Cole, who is a soloist at the New York City Ballet as well, but has his roots in Santa Fe, as well as music from Chickasaw composer Jarrett Tate. So that particular project called Following in Chapman's Line was a visual poem of grace, beauty, and the strength of cultural connectivity found in the heart of Santa Fe. And so what we tried to do is bring dance to national and international audience, showcasing the Wheelwright Museum, the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and the complex narrative that is the city of Santa Fe. We were influenced by the land, the abstract lines of Santa Fe light, the shadow of northern New Mexico that's have been so inspirational. So I think that in terms of the film, it was created as a dedication to a lot of different things, including gesture, rhythm, pace, the poetic, sound, unexplained symbols, history, and indigenous culture. And it was really amazing to be able to work with the Georgia O'Keeffe on that, to kind of look at investigating and expanding sort of these intersections of culture and concepts in a number of different ways in the way that we look at dance. And again, it was an extreme honor for me to be able to work with Jacques Soto, who is such a historical figure in American dance and also is Navajo. And that was exciting. The neat thing to be able to work with his protege, Harrison Cole, whose grandfather was the director of SAR, the School of American Research, for a number of years, and actually was the one who created the Indian Research Center at SAR as well, was really amazing. Harrison at that time had just left because of COVID, left New York because COVID, and was living here in Santa Fe, and it was just by luck that we had another dancer drop out and Harrison dropped in. Harrison came in and has a really lovely connection to Santa Fe. And we just thought it was a really, really interesting way of thinking about what Santa Fe is and how to interpret it. And we thought we would do that through land. This next project is a mural called Altogether Making Our Way Everyday Medicine by Eliza Naranjo Morris. So Eliza is from Santa Clara Pueblo, and this is a mural project she did, and it is up in the museum right now. And it really sort of looks to public spaces, including murals, who can serve as a vehicle for dialogue about history, describe relationship, and depict the resilience of community and hope, and to create equity and agency and healing. And so Eliza created this mural when no one else was in the museum during COVID. So the museum was completely closed, and Eliza had access to the museum for several months to create this project by herself. I think one of the things that she said is that the mural was, go ahead and switch the slide. It was telling the story and thinking about seeking to become our most compassionate selves, our most conscious selves, and recognizing our ability and responsibility to bring good medicine into the world. And it was an acknowledgement of the incredible fact that we were the current articulations of all the people we come from, and today we are all here together. At that time, it was a little bit dicey back in 2020. And she made this beautiful visual prayer that we were all just absolutely love. And I'm not sure of how we're gonna let it go when it needs to. So and again, another really wonderful project. And she's done projects all over the world. Her mother is renowned Santa Clara artist Nora Naranjo Morris, and so Eliza has done things and comes from a big artistic family, with her aunt being Roxanne Swensel and her cousin being Rose Simpson. The list just goes on and on, but she's shown at places like the Chelsea Art Museum, Site Santa Fe, the Heard Museum, the II Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, and she is an art teacher at the Kapa'o Community School in Santa Clara Pueblo. So go ahead and change the. So this is another smaller one, and I had noticed that we didn't really have anything connected with children. And so we looked into the collection and tried to find a number of objects that were made by Apache, Navajo, and Pueblo artists from the Wheelwright collection, and created this little installation that sits near our case trading post that is connected and is for children at the Wheelwright. So you can go ahead and change it, the slide. So in this, you can kind of see the making of toys and games obviously is universal, regardless of people and time. There have been a number of Native artists who started their careers by making toys as a means of artistic expression. And now a lot of those artists are known from their toys. You can see back here dolls way in the background made by Pablito Velarde. People like Mamie Deschili, who is renowned as an incredibly important Navajo folk artist. And you know, again, I think that artists, you know, that indigenous toys not only serve as a means of entertainment, but in some cases a vehicle for teaching values and role responsibilities within a culture, and toys. I think that would also serve to pass on religious teaching. And I guess there are just a number of different kinds of things that I think that toys were used for in tribal in a tribal context, but sometimes the pieces were just used for pure play. And I think that the toys weren't exclusive to one particular tribe. I think that the neat thing about it is that through trade, these are relationships, as we all know, existed through tribes going back as far as the 17th century. So it was common for tribes to go back and trade with one another to obtain necessities and clothes and weavings and jewelry. And I think the trade relationship between Navajo and Pueblo isn't a good example. So it wasn't out of the ordinary for Pueblo children to play, to grow up with toys made, by Navajos. So I think it's a lovely little element of Native American creative process, which celebrates the never-ending imagination and the exploration that includes making and playing with toys and basically having fun. So go ahead and switch it. So this is my current exhibition. And this is an exhibition called Abeda to Hajalik. And this is an exhibition that features the work of Navajo, a family of Navajo artists. And it's a masterful paintings and sculpture offer this really diverse selection of an innovative approach to telling the significant stories of two generations of the Abeda family, Narciso Abeda and his son and two daughters, Elizabeth Abeda, Pablita, and Tony Abeda. I think all of them, in a way, the work really provides a cultural history, just distinctive perspectives in art practice and storytelling. It investigates and expands the intersection of culture and concept, and it informs knowledge through recovering tribal or indigenous memories, sometimes humor, and engaging in land and contemporary life. And so this particular family is from what was called Canyoncito, which is west of Albuquerque, but more traditionally it's called Tohajale, which is the place where the water is drawn up and is located, like I said, west of the Albuquerque. I always think of Tohajale as where Mr. White from Breaking Bad hid all of his money. So as we keep going, you can go ahead and hit the slides. They all differ in their context and style, but all four provided real significant contemporary Navajo narratives. I think one of the things that I think is really important about all of them is that they all I think that artists in general, I think this show in particular was trying to make sure that you understood the role that artists have in, and maybe not realize have in contemporary society in their community, or in their state, or in their practice, or in American history in general. So when you look at people like Narcissa, go ahead and change it. You can see the complexity of the work. He was a part of Dorothy Dunn's studio teacher. He was a part of her Dorothy Dunn's studio, and she was his teacher. He was in that with a number of other master Native artists, including people like Alan Hauser and Pablita Velarde and Harrison Begay, and it goes on and on and on. As you see in the middle there, you see a piece that actually denotes what is a Navajo skinwalker. They're called Yamagloshis, and he at the time, this was in the 60s and the 50s, he was documenting this particular thing that happens in Navajo culture and religion, and it's very taboo to Navajos. You can really talk about this particular part of our culture, and he documented it, which was an incredibly important thing to do at that time, which I think it's still taboo to talk about this type of things, but he did it, which I think is him as an individual and him as an artist. He decided to do this, and the pieces are absolutely fantastic. They're important to our history and our culture, and they're wonderful. So go ahead and keep going, because I think we're going to run out of time. Elizabeth Abeda, the older sister who went to II, also went to the San Francisco Arts Institute, was a part of II when Fritz Scholder was her teacher, when she went to the San Francisco Arts Institute, she taught under Richard Shaw, who then influenced her work. I think that in terms of her, Elizabeth's work, she really modernized the Indian market, if you will, or Indian markets in general, and the way that her work was portrayed, in the way that she worked with collectors, and the way that she basically sold her work and presented her work. Go ahead and switch to the next one. This is Pablita Beta, who was her older sister and did not get her degree in art, but was obviously from an incredibly important family. She received her master's in public administration. She did her artwork in the evenings and in the weekends. She was collected in a number of different museums, including the National Museum of the American Indian. She worked as a lobbyist for the Navajo Nation in Washington, D.C. She worked for people like Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell. She also worked for Mo Udall. She then became a government, I can't remember what they called, but she was a lobbyist basically for the Smithsonian. She was very important in terms of the negotiations of pushing or getting the collection from the Museum of the American Indian, which was the New York-based museum that was going bankrupt, and pulling that collection into the Smithsonian. She's also there to make sure that the city and state of New York always had a place to show Native American art, and that is the George Gustav High Center in New York in the Financial District. She was there and making sure that the appropriations for the DC Mall Museum were in place, and she negotiated that with a number of different representatives. So she had a number of really wonderful roles in history as well. Go ahead and change this. This is Tony Abeda. Again, someone who has an incredibly flourishing career. I believe he's the first Navajo to have an honorary doctorate at the Institute of American Indian Arts, among any other accolade that you can think of here in New Mexico. He's shown all over the country. He is one of the first blue chip Indian artists, and has a really interesting and multidisciplinary practice, including jewelry and performance and painting, and just a really, really wonderful career so far. And so I just sort of feel like it reveals in itself how wonderful this contemporary family and the impact that they've had on American society and their people and internationally as well. So go ahead and switch the slide. This is my next exhibition that just went up. This is Mary Merez. She was an influential and innovative person in the Native American art field. She was Navajo, best known for synthesizing Navajo artistic traditions with modernism and semi-abstraction, which was known as the Mary Merez style. She worked from stylized paintings to realistic drawings, depicting moments in Navajo life. She also created book and record illustrations, textiles, graphic design. She was an art consultant here at the Wheelwright. She was also a curator at the Heard Museum. She lived most of her life in the Southwest. You can go ahead and change it. Most of her life in the Southwest, and she had been adopted into a non-Native family after suffering childhood polio. But her deep connection to the Navajo family and life as culture is central to her art practice, and her work really examines and celebrates the Navajo narrative and is intertwined with contemporary Indigenous feminist discourse. This is one of my favorite pieces ever, called Study of a Navajo Woman, and it's from the collection of the Heard Museum, and it was in a land-breaking exhibition called Shared Visions that the Heard did a number of years ago. Again, go ahead and switch it. In the 60s, she had received a scholarship through the Southwest Indian Art Project, which really profoundly influenced her artistic development. That project was organized by the University of Arizona's Museum of Art and funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it had a huge impact on the field. They worked with a number of different students. So Mary Morez was in there with people like Fritz Scholder and Michael Caboti and Helen Hardin. Their teachers were people like Lloyd Kivanu and Charles Lolema. And I think that it had such an impact, and they were basically with those students trying to look at them in kind of playing around with modernism. Go ahead and move to the next one, and pushing modernism in their work. So you can kind of see where things completely changed after that, connection with the Southwestern Indian Art Project. And again, the impact of that particular project on the field included the 1962 founding of the Institute of American Indian Arts here in Santa Fe. So she was right there, a part of, again, a really interesting time in the Native American fine art movement. And it really just talks about, you know, the depth and the breadth of Morez's creative output, including her leadership in transforming Native American traditions in a global contemporary art canon. So go ahead and change it. So as a Native curator, I like to think I use my capacity to empower others. LaDonna Harris, who is a Comanche social activist from Oklahoma and the founder and the president of America's for Indian Opportunity, which is based in Albuquerque, said traditionally one becomes a strong person to give back to the community, and the community nurture you while you're becoming strong. And once this is achieved, you really sort of should be looking for opportunities to give back to your community. So for me, Indigenous artists worldwide continue to use their work and practice to push their ever-changing role in the community, cultural, political, and using social activism in that way. And just in like their predecessors, as artists explore diverse mediums and experiment with how their art is presented. And they look to creating complex discussions and more, and make their work more accessible to the public. And I believe, again, looking at this work really kind of continues to push the continuum of social progress and racial justice in that way. And I try to do as much as I possibly can to support that. That concludes my talk, and I want to thank, again, everyone who was here and asked me to come here, Taylor and Jeremy and Dr. Ben for inviting me to speak today. I really enjoyed my time, and I really appreciate you listening to all of this, because it's a lot. And I want to thank you so much. It looks like my office is starting to get dark, because I forgot that you tend to get dark. So thank you again. I think I went over 5 minutes.
You are totally fine. You're great. Even more is always better with this. This is great. Yeah, well, thank you so much. And we're getting some questions rolling in. But I had a couple of the questions that came up initially. At the Wheelwright, do you mainly focus on Southwestern Indigenous cultures, or what's kind of the mission more broadly? Just because I think I missed that.
Primarily Southwest, but I feel like that's a little bit broad in its interpretation. So I think that, you know, the next exhibition I'm doing actually is an exhibition on First Californian artists. And that includes people like Fritz Scholder and Harry Fonseca and Rick Bartow and a number of other those really important artists that are from California. But I do know that in the past that we've looked at work from folks from Alaska as well as Canada. So I think, but primarily right now, I think that the focus at the Wheelwright is the Southwest. And it also includes people who have been in the Southwest, who may be from other countries or from other tribes that may not necessarily, but have some sort of connection to this area.
Great. So then another question, or like a set of questions actually, was focused on then framing, you know, the work that you've done in your presentation here in terms of the past and the future. So the first part of that then is, how did the exhibits differ in the past, either from the early days of the museum or even just before your time, that you maybe developed your stance from, or for your perspective?
Well, I think that the museum has always been really supportive of doing solo exhibitions of really important artists. And so in my background of looking at those are kind of the ones that are really kind of huge for the Wheelwright, and kind of some of the basis for me doing that exhibition on California artists, because we were there at the beginning of Fritz Schulder's career in the 70s, and having given him a solo show at that time. Harry Fonseca, again, another one with a solo show. Judith Lowry, another artist that we gave a solo show to. Frank LaPena, who, and I'm naming all these California artists off that have had solo shows because I'm thinking about it. But they could have think about Doug Coffin, who is Potawatomi, who has lived in Santa Fe for the majority of his life. So, I think that the solo shows, I think have been a lot of things that have happened. And also, historic exhibitions, things that talk to the history of Navajo, bridles and bits that connect us to both, ornaments and jewelry that is a serious focus of the Wheelwright as well. So there are a number of different kinds of exhibitions we've done. In the last couple of years that I've been there, there've been a number of survey shows, but again, there have also been solo shows. So Shanta Begay was one that we just recently did a solo show for. But I've been trying to connect more with the collection, and that's the basis of the California show, as well as the Transformation Activation exhibition, where Nathan Young came in and picked over 200 objects to create an installation. So
Wow,
hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does, and actually it answers the next one too, which is what's the future of. But it sounds like
yeah, the next one is the first Californian show, which I'm really excited about, and we've been able to get some really interesting pieces for. And it includes, like I said, I mean, any kind of the best of the best, and also looking at some younger people that we've had continued relationship. It's just sort of this historical kind of thing that the Wheelwright has done with California artists, including a very close relationship with Harry Fonseca, a very close relationship with Judith Lowry, and now, as we look now, a very close relationship with Cara Romero, who is Chemehuevi, but makes her home here in Santa Fe, went to II, was sat on our board at one point. So, there's those connections, I think, that are really important to think about in terms of the Native people that come and stay or live or are connected to this institution in some way, or hopefully will connect them to this institution in some way.
That's great. I was just so fascinated too, and it was great to see how you incorporate both, more established artists and folks that have been around longer and have their name out there, but also then these young contemporaneous Indigenous folks, like I forget the lady's name, but you said on the border.
The Tana Antam. I know she was born in 1996. Like, who's born in 1996? My God, it's shocking, but the work is so good. And it was her coming out of undergraduate, and those pieces from her from her senior show are going to be in a show at the Autry. And then the pieces that, again, it's nice to have people watching what you're doing. And so, like I said, the Smithsonian with the walls that we accessioned into, the smaller pieces of the walls are going for an exhibition on the border at the Museum of American Art, which we're absolutely thrilled for. So I feel like in a lot of ways, making sure that we accession some of these pieces that we're looking at that I feel are important to the field are being reconfirmed by the Smithsonian wanting them for a show, or the Autry wanting to them show. So I feel like I'm kind of a little bit on the right track with some of this work, and really kind of getting a good sense of who I feel like are, budding stars in the Native American art field, besides, the folks that I know and love from my generation. I also need to keep looking and thinking about the younger folks as well.
Wow, yeah, no, that's great. That's good. And yeah, that wall, that's so powerful. And the way you described that was just amazing. But So there was a question about that. So that was at once, and you just kind of referenced, but that was a bigger wall that then they took apart to put pieces of it at Wheelwright.
We
Is
couldn't
that
fit
what
the
I'm
whole,
understanding?
yeah, we couldn't fit the whole 22-foot wall in the Wheelwright, so they took 2 sections out and gave them to us to use for our show, because our show was much smaller.
Right. Oh
And
wow,
they worked really nicely.
that's amazing. Wow. So let's see. Are there any other questions here? Just gonna look. Sometimes they pop in. So you said you're closing when we talked before the presentation. You said you'll be closed in January for a new exhibition, but then you should be reopening roughly
Right,
when?
the new show, the Abeta exhibition, which I encourage you all to come see, is closing, I believe, on January 11th. I could be wrong. We'll have to look at the website, but it's right around there. So maybe it's January 7th.
Mm.
And then the new exhibition opens, the California Stars opens on February 11th.
Oh wow. All right. And then do you all offer like what's the fee structure for coming to the museum? Is it
well, we're open Tuesdays through Saturdays. I believe that natives are free. I think veterans are free, students are free. I think it's a $10 fee to come in. We're open from 10 until 4 every day.
Great. Well, that sounds, very, very accessible. So
And you can always check our website to make sure that I'm right on all this.
Let's see. So we had another question come in just now that says, can you mention some of the sources of for people who love the creativity of modern artists, but find the field a little bewildering because there's just a lot of different artists and complexity. So, what are some of the artists that you're most fond of, maybe, or that inspire the way you think?
I'm a huge fan of Stephen Yazzi's work. He's an artist out of Colorado, Navajo artist that is absolutely wonderful. I am, gosh, I mean, the list just goes on and on of people that I'm interested in. Nick Gallenden from Alaska, I'm very excited about his work. Cara Romero, I think, is absolutely wonderful. I'm interested in Joanne Lopez's work at right now. Heather Greenfeather, her work I think is really fantastic. I love all kinds of work from all over the place. Rosemary Desplas Mesa is another person that I think is wonderful. Angela Ellsworth out of Arizona State University is fantastic. I mean, I could just keep going on and on and on and on. And on.
You're the one that knows them all.
So, so yeah, there's so many great people. I think my favorite curator out there is Candace Hopkins, native curator, is Candace Hopkins, and she's doing so much innovative and really, really contemporary, cutting edge kind of work. And, to look at her work, I think would kind of really give you a good sense of what's going on in the very, very contemporary world. So.
Okay. Well, and then, so how do like you're saying, artists that you become familiar with, some, in some cases, other institutions become interested in their art, but how does that start? I mean, where do you first come into contact with the works by these artists? What's kind of the venues for that? I know it's probably varied, but what's, some examples?
I mean, I think you have to do your research when you're looking for younger artists or artists in general. I think that they kind of come through up through different kinds of venues. Maybe they're represented by an art gallery, or maybe that they've been in community shows or community or art spaces in exhibitions, and they are connected to community in a different way. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can find folks. You know, the young woman who's Kana Optum, remember I went to her senior crit, and that's how I saw her work. But I think going and engaging the community is always how you find out about, and you find out about other artists from other artists. And for me too, right now, I do a lot of research online. During COVID, I was doing a lot of research on Instagram. Also, you know, you're looking, I think that people look to other curators for inspiration as well. So if another curator is giving the yay or the nay on someone, I think that that's another indication of work that has been kind of looked at by another or, you know, has been supported by another institution. I think the artist residencies are another way of looking at artists, finding out who has gotten a residency at a prestigious residency, I think is important. People who are getting fellowships and grants, I think is also really important. There's a number of different ways to find
Right.
folks, for sure.
Oh, I'm just sure that this just seems daunting to me. Just that there's probably yeah, exactly. But that's probably
what about this and what about that? Yeah, I know, and it can just keep going on and on. So
no, that's great. That's great. Well, let's see. The last question we have is just when people come to visit your museum, is it possible to see collections that are not on display or? No,
you know, it's kind of, I mean, I think for researchers or for folks that it's not necessarily that we would bring the public in. I think it's a process, and in the same way that I'm sure that you all do your process, that that you would have to make, you know, an appointment. There'd have to be a specific type of thing that would need to be researched and, you know, figured out. We could usually give information over the phone if there was something that we had in our archives that we had easily accessible, but not necessarily just the public coming into the collection, I think. And that's basically the main way that a lot of museums do their work. I mean, right. They don't necessarily let people down into collections at the Met every day, if that makes sense. So, but if there is a research need, or if there is something that we can work with our colleagues on, or other curators or folks that need to see things, then that's something we do. In terms of some of the more sacred things that we have here at the Wheelwright, those things, we do have a relationship with the Navajo Nation. And so if, for example, you were an apprentice, Hatafli, or apprentice medicine man, and needed and wanted to listen to historic recordings that could help you in your religious practice, you would have to get approval from the Navajo Nation Historic Preservation Office, and then they would give approval to us to have you access that material. So there's a lot of protocol in some of these things that we do here at the Wheelwright.
Well, that's great, and that protects, you know, the descendant communities, the objects, the knowledge. Right.
But it also helps with supporting the continuum of Navajo tradition and being able to support tribes' sovereignty and agency and self-determination in that way too. So I think we've been doing a good job that way as well.
It sounds like you've been doing an amazing job. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's such an interesting presentation, and just amazing art, of course. So I've never been to your museum, but I am going to be in Santa Fe in January. So I hope you're open for the time I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me know when you're here, and I'm happy to take you on a tour if I can.
That'd be great. Well, yeah, thank you so much again, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.